So number 2 on this. Unfortunately, this doesn't just extend to one subclass of peoples. And unfortunately, the practitioners that go into this do not do so willingly or willfully. They're often stripped of power and control and are given small, misleading breadcrumbs that lead them toward making certain decisions that are not beneficent or beneficial to their souls, right? And this is really what causes a person to think that they are making choices when the choices are being made from within them by controlling their endocrine system and their sexual responses on such a heightened level that they are experiencing this activation of eroticism through this geometric resonance. Morphologically, they are being changed. On a cellular level, they are being changed. This is enough cathartic metanoia of experience to cause an epigenetic rewrite of information. And so what we have is we have males who are being stripped of their very spiritual identity, that they are no longer males throughout the process of what they're being forced to do as their work. And so when you get into the idea of the great work, it's the great con, it's the great deception to lead both men and women to this sort of well where there's no other place to drink, where all of these apex predators that are not even able or there's no capability to see them, right? Yet they were there all along, waiting for you to take a drink out of the proverbial waters of life, to stay alive, to sustain, to maintain, to live, to be. And so this gets into reincarnation, this gets into re-embodiment. It gets into, again, erotic number systems and what they might mean when applied toward this geometrical transactional state of exchange, where a person is actually spending their identity on the connery, on the sale, the quick sale of a pseudo self that leaves them as an avatar, a crucible, an empty shell to be commandeered quite literally at any time. So then you ask yourself, how could this person be so evil? Because there's no real person there. Well, I talked to this person, I knew this person, and it's like, did you really see what they were doing in the shadows? Did you see what was being done to them? And even more so, when you begin to look at this and you're very honest with yourself, you're like, oh yeah, that person talked about playing with the Ouija board. That person talked about the ideation with demons and angels. That person talked about being attacked or having voices, or being attacked by entities, and everybody thought they were crazy. And it's like, how important do you think that individual was or is, and the commandeering of that person, and to steal their identity, to take their identity away? So there are those who are kept ignorant as henchmen that will never be activated. They will never be sexually activated by process of this gateway. This gateway exists in males too. Males are not excluded. In fact, the feminine component can be activated within the male body, within the male physiology. This is a big part of what's happening through psychical rape, generational rape and grooming, as well as reincarnated, re-embodied rape and grooming. Okay, so it's not just this simple process. They have the number system. That's what our social security number is. They have us designated in batches. They know who we are. They know what we are. The great work is working on us. And if we were to break free, if one were to break free, well, then they could stand behind it all and say, oh, do you see why we did this? We did this so that you would know yourself and you would break free. So they're standing at this pivot point, but they undeniably, like Senator Palpatine in Star Wars, they can't hide their level of evil. Like their disparate measure of evil is indescribably not something that they can just sort of gloss over, right? So that's why these ideations in society exist, where you have career, you have this false mentorship, where you have these woke, unicorn people, predators reading, stories to kids in libraries. It's why the state to state, right? But the state of being, the state of mind, right? And the governing state, the governing body, the governing state of mind to govern the body allows the liberal aspect, and even uses the term liberal, which is liberty, which is a false form of freedom. And so a war is being fought, a war within you every night before I go to bed, especially certain nights, definitely last night. I see the faces, the eyes of the people that are doing spiritual magic on me. I see the practitioners. I see what they're doing. I know their intent. And I've had that ability since I was a kid. I never knew how to interact with it. I've seen the vortex of demonic black vortex swirling around above me, where I'm like, what the fuck is that? In my house, looking up from my bed. I didn't realize that my mother was a practitioner. These people, they call themselves Christians. And then when you see what they're really about, they hide behind Christianity. But many of them, when they pray, they aren't praying for you. They are praying on you. Praying has two different meanings. There's P-R-A-Y, and that's where actually you're giving off your energy for someone else's need. And you're P-R-E-Y-ing, right? You are preying on other people. And so when you have somebody who is sitting right beside you in church, right, eating the body of Christ and drinking Christ's blood, sacrificing you're the pure son, you're the one who thinks that purity exists, they are preying on you, and they are opening a gate, and they want you to come into the light. They want you to gain the knowledge. Your mom wants you to be knowledgeable. Your mom wants you to have worldly knowledge. Your mom wants you to be a lawyer or a doctor and be respectable. She doesn't want you to be a persona non grata. She doesn't want you to be a pariah. She doesn't want you to be a Jesus rejected, right? But even more so, you get into the actuality of what this potential Dionysian type cult was doing, and they may have been doing something almost like that show Dexter that my son brought up to me yesterday, where you have this serial killer who has altruistically made amends with himself, where he's like, if I'm gonna have to do this and serial kill people to become a better person, I'm gonna be a serial killer to serial killers, right? So you get into this idea that you can kind of look at the disciples, Jesus and the disciples, and go, okay, they each took turns as the top practitioner. They had a different, slightly zodiacal way of their magic and the expression and the outcome of the magic rituals that they were doing, right? And their intent. And yet they were in concert with one another, right? And believed in a similar system where they would take something that's so dark and activate that darkness through Thelemic sex magic ritual, right? And instead of taking on the selfish energy, they would use this as a form of transcendence toward the application of what Nietzsche would call, the Overman or the Übermensch, to create a world, a Welt, right? A Weltanschauungskrieg, to create an environment where this Übermensch would be more than welcomed. That this Übermensch who had spiritually, metaphysically, ontologically transcended your average everyday person who would no longer live within the confines of the constructs and couldn't, of this limiting factor, yet had experienced the activating gateway process, let's say, that we discussed in the prior video, right? That involved the male and female component, if you can put that together within. So this is why witches attack anuses, okay? This is why this is a very sensitive subject. Nobody wants to talk about it. No one wants to hear about it. But a lot of people are beginning to discuss it. And that is this vibratory aspect where people who have never had any sort of thoughts or any intentions of any sort of strange homoerotic, it's like, is it in the water? Is it in the plastics? What the fuck's going on? And then when you begin to look into remote viewing and you begin to look at spiritual warfare, you see that this shit's been going on forever, and that there are more practitioners coming to the front line, quite literally, who know who have acknowledged what they're doing. They know what they're doing, and they have every intent. And they're people you might not have ever even met, because they can feel you, they can smell you, they can be aware of you, and they can be anywhere at any time. And might I say, they may even be disincarnate, okay? And this is what gets into some really scary territory, is because when you look at the 8 billion people, or not going on 9 billion people on this planet right now, or however many it is. I mean, there's that Lee's Real Talk, which I think she's a complete and total Manchurian candidate there, an agent provocateur, a sleeper cell, if you will, out in the open now for the Chinese government, the CCP, or the MSS through CCP, but you incongruence with. But what she says is that there's only like probably 250 to 350 million people in China right now, and that those numbers are a complete fabrication and a lie. But I digress. What we're looking at is that if you have replicants, we'll call them, not to steal anything from Blade Runner, or from Philip K. Dick, I Dream of Electric Sheep and so forth, but it works, right? Minx France, I mean, it works. Man in the High Tower, yeah, it's pretty crazy. But you look at the fabric of reality and these layers of reality, and you begin to see that if you were to activate with great passion and sex magic an event, so you might have this strange thing where you overlook a certain thing, and it's like you didn't look at the sexual component to every major event throughout history and around the world. That was the last thing in the world that you were thinking about or looking at, right? Is how did this coincide with a witch's high holiday, right? How did this coincide with some sort of weird calls about child abduction or sex rituals, right? And when you begin to put the tapestry together, and then you understand the activation mode or the method of the physiology, and how when you get into this gateway activation with one specific person, imagine machines that are alluded to in witch lore literature and grimoire, where you have got these machines that are actually activating all 4 points of this sexual prima materia lubricating female ejaculate, which takes place in the male physical form as well. Yeah, like in real time, real men. So once these gateways are active and they have a specific pattern, energetic pattern, you may have many practitioners who are doing this willfully. It's kind of like Eyes Wide Shut, but imagine they're not just being a bunch of old, ugly people in masks, but you've got children who've been newly recruited children, pure children, or ignorant children that may actually be picked out of batches that are being groomed throughout lifetimes. This gets into some really strange and hairy territory, because you're thinking, who the fuck would think like this, right? And then you see the outcome, and the outcome is not only total control, willingly and willfully, when you talk about Hansel and Gretel, when you talk about the Lady of the Wood, right? When you discuss Mother Circe, it's the same story. As with the siren, you have this depiction of this female or feminine force playing victim and drawing in the hero, and then someone comes with this benevolent, heroic need to help other people, but then they have the mathematics down. These witches understand, why would a man come to the aid of a woman? Either he's coming out of purity and love, we can use that. Yeah, we could drink his blood. We could use the hair of a pure man or whatever, right? But that would be much more rare than somebody that felt guilt, right? Or like guilt for their past actions and wanted to make amends by helping someone else out. Because many people just pass it up and go, I ain't fucking with that. I hear this screaming woman. Hell no. Like there's people who just be like, no, I don't care how much screaming I hear. I'm not getting drawn in, no matter how real that is, right? You have people who just have this intuitive knowing, but also a disconnect, right? And it seems like that might just be the way to go to protect your soul, all right? But then you have those who do that, and that you get into races of peoples that are discussed with Madison Grant passing of the Great Race, right? Which he was a practicing lawyer in New York around the same time as Ingersoll Lockwood. And if you ever read Ingersoll Lockwood's stories, it's bizarre. It's about these beings that live inside Earth, inner Earth. They're a different type of being. They're like this translucent. I mean, it's bizarre stuff. It really is. So, Madison Grant was a New York philanthropist. Even Hitler wrote him supposedly and said, he commended him on a piece of work that probably affected Mein Kampf. I don't know. I can't say that I know the two dates, but it deeply affected Hitler's ideological stance. So you have this idea of, like, if you could picture. So the whitest person on the planet is an albino black person. You ever see that picture? And the blackest person on the planet is a black person. And they're both black, right? So it makes you, and you look at this tribe of people that are in Japan, and they're supposed to be the original Japanese people, and they couldn't look more Caucasian and more white. And there's not that many of them, and they almost look like Noah from the Bible. Like they almost look like these white Santa Claus looking people. It's the most bizarre thing. I can't remember the name of that tribe. It's been many years since I've seen that, but I did see a reference to that a little more recently. I can't remember. I'm gonna say it starts with an A maybe, but it's a tribe. So you begin to see these people, these races, where I guess my inference here is that there are races that aren't prevalent now today, where we kind of look at each other and we go, oh, this person's Indian, this person's black, this person's white, this person's Chinese, or this person's Asian, and we don't really take into consideration that, or this person's an American Indian, that there are more derivatives or derivations based on race as well. And that in the genetic propensity, you have certain genomic information that is being locked away or suppressed from the pool, the genetic pool, and not necessarily how people might procreate with one another from other races, but how they might come together and resonate through a harmonic union, right? Because I do believe that this time did exist. I don't know if that was Tartaria or, it has other references, but you understand what I'm saying. Or if this leads back to Sumeria or Mesopotamian cultures or long before that, or maybe on a different planet or maybe different planetary bodies. It's hard to know what the fuck's going on here and how many breakoffs of reality there really is, right? But to get into the notional aspect that this gateway is placed within us, this practitionership is an activation process to coerce us into becoming gateways, and that it is not just exclusive toward the feminine body, that men really are part and parcel to the Ouroboros, the Samsara, almost used as if they are like drones in a way, right? But that there is lost information, that is a literature that is written as code in the Y chromosome, that there has to be a pure, the potential for a pure sun, and that limits the amount of exposure and the practical magic or the practical use of temporal knowledge, right? So you have the tree of life, which is, even if you have been activated, you choose to follow the directive of love. And love and lust are at the root of this, because at the center of the pure source energy that emanates love, the anti-principle or the antithetical aspect of this, the pentagram, the dark side of this Fibonacci phi Metatron's cube, 6-sphere face, you have lust, which is the sacrifice of purity. And that is where everything hinges on, right there.